So Maura, if you are ready, it looks like we have, I'm trying to see.
I think we're just missing Joe.
Okay, great.
From what I can see. Bensonville.
Here, sorry.
Thank you. It's okay. City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Here.
Thank you. Des Plaines.
He was
think
on
you're
earlier.
Muted. Let's see.
Okay. Well, we know Malcolm's here.
He's here. Yeah. Let the record show. Alderman Chester's here. Elmhurst.
Here.
Harwood Heights.
Here.
Park Ridge.
Here.
River Grove.
Here.
Schaumburg.
Here.
Schiller Park.
Here.
And Wooddale.
Here.
Niles, Joe let us know he had a situation this morning, he wouldn't be able to make it. So we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the September 23rd, 2021 Fly Quiet Committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
Almost so.
Second.
Is there any discussion, modifications? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and do the roll call again.
Bensonville.
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Yes.
Des Plaines. Okay. Give us a thumbs up, Alderman Chester. Okay, he went away. Elmhurst.
Aye.
Harwood Heights.
Aye.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
River Grove.
Yes.
Schaumburg.
Yes.
Schiller Park.
Yes.
And Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, minutes are approved.
Great. Next on the agenda is ONCC member comments. So if there are any members of the full commission who are not part of the Fly Quiet Committee that would like to speak before we move into our topics for the day, now is the time. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands, so we will move on. You all know the drill by now, so we are still in the midst of the review of Alternative H. We are moving on to primary headings today. So Ryan, I will hand it over to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Just to go over where we left off the previous meeting and to get everyone up to speed if you haven't joined us in a while. We have been spending a lot of time reviewing and revising the two alternatives that have been advanced by this committee, alternatives B and H. We are currently in the review and revision process for alternative H. At the last meeting, we did cover the primary configurations, and the committee did make some changes to the schedule of the configurations. And then with that, we are now moving on to primary headings, which refers to the primary departure headings to be used for the designated departure runways in each of our configurations. So as a reminder, alternative H, this is our kind of table showing how we are currently approved at this point. As I mentioned, the configuration schedule was modified last time to better distribute those occurrences of the crosswind configurations throughout the 16-week schedule. Alternative H, now that we're moving on to the vector headings, as a reminder, the designated vector headings for alternative H, there are only currently a single vector heading for the east-west parallel runways and two vector headings for each of the crosswind configurations. And so what we're going to do is step through each of the departure runways like we did for alternative B. We'll discuss what the vector headings are currently and whether or not the committee wants to make any changes. So with that, we have runway 4 left, which is one of our crosswind departure runways. 4 left currently has 2 vector headings assigned to it. And so as the configuration is used in the schedule, the first instance in the configuration in weeks 3, it is assigned a 049 degree vector heading. So a 10 degree turn to the right. And then on the following week, when the configuration comes back in the schedule on week 7, the vector heading would be 029 degrees or a 10 degree turn to the left. And then that would switch back and forth in the 2 remaining weeks. So back to 049 degrees on week 11, and then 029 degrees in week 15. So those are the 2 currently assigned vector headings for runway 4 left. To the right, we have what this committee approved for the same departure runway and the same configuration for alternative B. As a reminder, the discussion with alternative B, it was decided that although at this time, maybe RNAV departure procedure would not be ideal due to the complexity of that procedure and the potential length of time for implementation. It was decided that a vector heading with a turn would be able to accomplish the same goals of concentrating the flights over that tri-state corridor and some of that more compatible land use along the tri-state as well as the Des Plaines River. And so alternative B has a vector heading with a turn approved currently for its primary departure heading for runway 4 left. So at this point, Madam Chair, if there are any questions regarding the vector headings for alternative H currently assigned to 4 left.
So, okay, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last time we did departure headings, we went 1 by 1, correct?
We did. So
Okay.
that's, yeah, I guess that was do the same process here. We'll go 1 by 1. And if there is a discussion and then any changes, and then before we move on to the next runway.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to do our standard round robin. If you'll recall with departure headings, the order of communities is based on kind of those most impacted by that particular runway and the departure headings being discussed. So we're going to be a little bit out of order. So just give everyone the heads up. So, and we'll go through the first time to ask questions and provide initial feedback. We'll go through a second time for any follow-up before we decide if we need more information or if we're ready to make a motion. So Des Plaines, you are up first. Okay, it seems Alderman Chester is having some technical difficulties, so we'll move on to Park Ridge. Ernie?
Good morning. Thank you, Karen. We would encourage changing the primary departure heading on 4 left as we did with alternative B for alternative H and put the dog leg in, utilizing that single departure procedure for runway 4 left.
Great, thank you. Niles is not here. Ward 39.
Yeah, I agree with Ernie on that. We've had this discussion before for alternative B, and I think it was a good resolution, and I agree totally with Ernie there.
Great, thank you. Harwood Heights.
Okay, it's a threesome. I agree with Ernie. We've discussed taking over the least amount of impact areas where the 2 arrows are really just taking in more people with noise. So I agree.
Great. Schiller Park. Russ, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, I agree with the other 3 towns.
Okay. River Grove.
I also agree.
Okay. Elmhurst. Oh, Bob, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think this, departure with the dog leg shown in alternative B is an improvement over the two different departures shown on AH on the left side. Takes much more advantage of compatible land use, and so I'm supportive of it.
Thank you. Bensonville.
So I am going to take a slightly different approach. This isn't my neck of the woods. So I'll support whatever Park Ridge, Plains, 439, whatever they want to do. I just want to remind everyone, and I'll invite Cynthia to back me up on this or confirm this, but when we do make turns, we're creating some more noise. It does require extra energy to turn. So I just want to be cognizant that we're building on that. Cynthia, can you back me up on that?
Hold on, Cynthia's gonna have a turn.
Oh, she is gonna have a turn? Okay, I forgot.
Yeah.
So I'll wait for her, but
Okay.
I'll let Cynthia speak on that.
All right, thanks. Wooddale.
I have no comments.
Okay, so it's Schaumburg's turn. You know, we evaluated this pretty thoroughly with alternative B. I'm kind of with Evan that whatever the impacted communities prefer is what Schaumburg will support. I do have some questions about if we go with the single dog leg option, what that means from a rotational perspective. But we'll get to that when we revisit it. So we'll move on to Fair. Dan?
Thank you. Yeah, from the perspective of trying to spread the impacts as much as possible, keeping in mind that if we had an average night of 90 operations, 60 of those are arrivals, 30 are departures. So to avoid re-impacting the arrival residents, it makes sense. And from the standpoint, if you are going to be impacted by departures, they're as widely dispersed as possible. I guess to Evan's point, and we obviously need more clarification on this, it's our understanding just because there's a 40-degree turn in here, that doesn't require the pilot to do a 40-degree bank angle. The larger aircraft can do a lower turn radius. They'll eventually intersect that heading, and that's part of what causes the dispersion with the vector headings. Thanks.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Thanks, Karen. We do support the dog leg in this configuration because mainly a lot of the most impacted communities, obviously it's their consensus, but also this is going to be the lighter fleet mix utilizing these runways. We've utilized this configuration going to the south for many years, and I think we've established some compatible land use with sound insulation along those corridors. Additionally, I think the biggest factor for us is the fact that this is a transportation corridor. It provides some masking, if you will, of the noise, and has proven to be a successful model across the country in trying to take advantage of those transportation corridors with our air traffic. So we are in support of the dog leg, consistent with, you know, the most impacted communities consensus.
Thank you. Ron?
No comment.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're gonna go back to the top for any final comments. You can feel free to pass if nothing's changed. Displays? Okay, Park Ridge?
Nothing further, Chair.
All right, Ward 39,
Nothing further.
Harwood Heights,
No change.
Schiller Park,
No change.
River Grove,
Still support it.
Elmhurst,
I'm good.
Bensonville,
Pass.
Wooddale,
Good.
Schaumburg is good. Dan, anything else?
Yeah, just something quick, and I appreciate Landerman Brown putting these slides side by side and also keeping the number of weeks that each of these iterations occurs. And I think that's an important factor to consider. These headings don't act on their own. The committee should also consider the number of iterations and what that potentially concedes. And in the case of alternative H, which is sort of a play on operational equality rather than schedule equality, even though we're discussing what would occur on, in this case, 4 left departures, a considerable amount of those need to be conceded to the long runway to get that operational equality. And the same applies to the dotted line, the 22 right arrivals. So when you're considering these headings, you need to also consider those consecutive impacts and how those stack against the primary impacts. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia? Cynthia, did you have anything? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I'll pass.
Okay, Ron?
Pass.
Okay, so at this point, I will entertain a motion on what we would like to see for a departure heading for runway 4L.
Chair, I'll make that motion. I move that we change the primary departure heading for alternative H, runway 4 left departures from as proposed to the dual departures of 049 and 029 to the dogleg departure as previously approved for alternative B.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so just so everyone's clear on the motion before we take a vote, Ernie is recommending that we take the dogleg departure heading that was approved with alternate B and incorporate that into alternate H as the departure heading for runway 4 left. So with that, let's do a roll call.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines, Elmhurst,
Aye.
Harwood Heights,
Aye.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
and Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Maura. All right, Ryan, let's move on.
All right. Moving on to runway 9 right, as currently assigned for alternative H, runway 9 right has a vector heading of 080 degrees, which is a turn to the north, which will be utilized in weeks 6 and 14. Again, the configurations utilizing 9 right only have a single vector heading as opposed to alternative B that has 2 vector headings, with the idea that the vector headings would be alternated for each iteration that time that runway comes up in the schedule. So for alternative H, runway 9 right would utilize a departure heading of 080 degrees in both weeks 6 and 14. On the right, you can see what was approved for alternative B for runway 9 right, and that was 2 vector headings, one in week 5 at 080 degrees, and then a second vector heading to be utilized in week 11 at 065 degrees. So these are the comparison of what you have currently on the left for alternative H and what was approved through this committee for alternative B for the same runway.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So just so everyone's clear, this one's a little, we have to decide. We have a single departure heading with alternate H. So the discussion needs to focus on, are we sticking with a single departure heading? And if so, what should that departure heading be? So Ward 39, if you want to kick us off.
Oh, yes. The 80-degree departure heading, I don't have a problem with that. I do have a major problem with the fact there's only a single heading. The goal seems to be distribute the noise as much as possible, and this seems to go against that. Also, it gives less relief to the people that are long suffering under the arrival approaches there. And I think going with the two headings as in B gives more relief to the people under the arrival corridors and distributes the noise on the departure side too. So I'm an advocate of adding another departure heading for this alternative.
Okay, thank you. Schiller Park.
That mostly concerned Chicago, so I'll go along with what he said. I understand what he said. It's going to probably be, yeah, you want to give the best relief down there, and instead of being pounded twice, it's a little bit better. So yeah, I'll go with what he said.
Okay, Harwood Heights.
I'm also in agreement. I would even like 065 degrees, but I'll go with the change, which we discussed in detail in alternate B, and switch that out from alternate H. So I'm in agreement.
Okay, Park Ridge.
Thanks, Karen. This is something that I hadn't thought about before, but I just want to bring it up. Not that I'll change. I do believe that having two departure headings helps to achieve the goal of what we're trying to do, especially in this case for the Northeast Quadrant. I will share a concern, and I just throw it out for comment. But in both cases of a 080 or a 065 departure, we're taking those departure courses right over the final approach course for Runway 27 Center for arrivals. And I'm wondering if we aren't creating an impact problem there of consecutive impacts from the standpoint of having those two departure courses cross the final approach course for Runway 27 Center.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. Joe's not here. Dennis?
Yes, I support the alternate B. I think also that, it's less impact on one area. So I go with B.
Okay, Des Plaines? Okay, Elmhurst?
Yes, I think Elmhurst has generally been more of a supporter for one departure heading for each runway configuration because of simplicity. But we talked about this when we were going through B, and the two runways, the two departure headings were accepted. The one benefit of B with the two headings coming off of 9R is that 065 departure does get you a little bit more away from the arrival path than the one at 080. So there is some benefit there. So we would support this alternative B configuration for departure.
Okay, thank you. Bensonville?
Bensonville defers to the impacted communities. I am somewhat intrigued with Ernie's comment, though. I think that we should flesh that out a little bit more.
Okay. When did you want to flush that out some more?
No, I mean, I'm trying to think. Ernie, can you chime back in and explain that a little bit more on the, are you talking on the arrivals for 2A Center?
Maybe I can help too.
Yeah, Ryan, perfect.
So to Ernie's, what Ernie's referring to is that you'll see we have both on both images, the red dotted line, the 27 Center arrivals, which would be utilized in alternative H in weeks 2 and 10. And to Ernie's concern is if, with a single vector heading to the north, you're overlapping that arrival stream. So that would be additional overflights to those communities under that arrival stream. Adding a second vector heading would add another week of additional flights over that arrival stream. My counterpoint to that would be, as a reminder, the big concept that both alternative B and H shared in common that the committee really embraced, and what resulted in both of these moving forward was that split airfield concept, where we were, as best as we can, keeping operations to the north airfield as well as the south airfield from week to week. And by doing that, it becomes very difficult not to get some overflights of those arrival streams on a week-to-week basis, unless those departure runways are going straight out. It's very hard not to keep those operations as much to the north or to the south, depending on which configuration and week we're doing. So the real idea here with having these flights turn to the north and unfortunately also overlapping that arrival stream for runway 27 center is to keep the operations in those weeks as much to the north as we can.
Okay, so we're just crossing the arrival. We're not on the same heading of it. So I mean, crossing's gotta inherently happen. That's fine. I defer to the communities impacted.
Thank you. Wooddale?
Nothing to add.
Okay, so from Schaumburg's position, my thought, similar to Ernie's in regards to the overlap with the arrival departures, was that if we were going to go with a single departure heading, perhaps a straight out departure heading would make the most sense to kind of keep, I know it's not a huge distance, but at least it would be kind of distinct, but similar to Bensonville, if the community's impacted desire to see the two departure headings, again, I'm open to that. I will want to revisit that when we can kind of see the big picture and what that means from a rotational perspective, but I'm certainly open to it because it does achieve the goal of dispersing the noise. So let's go to Ron.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the use of, I guess, explanation for this of consecutive impacts with the arrivals. I would caution on calling it consecutive impacts because typically consecutive impacts would be 2 weeks in a row. You'd be flying over the same communities. And with the way this is set up, this wouldn't be happening. If that runway is being used for arrivals, it wouldn't be the following week, probably 2 weeks down the road or 3 weeks down the road. So technically, I wouldn't consider this consecutive impact. So I would just be very cautious about spending a ton of time on trying to avoid the arrival streams coming in, because it truly is not going to be a consecutive impact. And with the closeness of the parallel runways, both north and south, it's going to be virtually impossible to have a departure that someone that would get arrivals normally may not hear it some.
All right, thank you. Dan?
Thank you. Yes, to build on some of the discussion, this was one of the major compromises in selecting the north-south or split airfield, is that your departure runway is trapped inboard of your arrival runway, which with this quadrant system necessitates crossing over that arrival stream. Our thought is you should minimize that to the extent possible and look at how long this 10-degree heading, and this is just a flight track, this isn't the noise profile, where you're re-impacting that arrival stream for probably 3 to 5 miles and over some significantly populated areas. And the other concern over both runway heading and 10-degree applies to the quadrant system as to whether some of those would actually overlap into the adjacent quadrant. Since they aren't confined to this heading, I believe they can be 5 nautical miles either side by our current metric. So those communities that start 3 miles out from the airport may get impacted when the noise should be in the north airfield. You can actually end up with noise in both the north and south airfield. So I do fear from the standpoint of departures, you may defeat the quadrant system with 0 and 10-degree headings. Thanks.
Thank you. Cynthia?
We definitely advocate for 2 headings in this alternative H for both sets of long runways. For 9 right, we advocate for the lowest population headings which are 20 degrees and under. So for this particular incidence, we would advocate for 70 and 80 degrees for the two headings to be assigned here. And to Ryan's point, as far as keeping north to the north and south to the south, I think the same concept applies as far as, you know, maybe not spilling into the diagonal communities, the cross runway configurations. And when we have a 65-degree heading on 9 right, we actually increase our footprint to impact Niles and Park Ridge. So we're kind of, you know, pushing, I kind of, from SOC standpoint, we have 9 communities, and we kind of have really come to the aspect that, you know, each community needs to own their burden of their runway system. They all benefit from O'Hare's advantages, and, you know, those come with some issues. So as far as, you know, pushing a 65-degree heading to avoid overlap of arrival runways, you start to get to a fairness issue when you start to impact the diagonal communities, which I think you do with the 65-degree heading. Again, on the arrival stream and avoiding that overlap, I want everybody to really realize that the figures kind of give a concept in your mind that really aren't going to be accurate for the departures that are going to go out at any of these headings. There's going to be a considerable amount of dispersion. And so those aircraft are going to be transiting that arrival path at very different locations. So it's going to have a dispersed effect, which is a benefit. It's not going to, you know, give the impact that the visual image on the screen here implies. There's a great deal of dispersion there. The lighter aircraft are going to peel off much earlier. They're going to reach 3,000 feet and peel off. So I think we're imposing some damage trying to avoid that isn't a really aware or, you know, obvious from the images that we're looking at. So we would advocate for 70 and 80 degrees and 2 departure headings for 9 right.
Thank you. We're going back to the top for any final comments. Ward 39.
Yes, it seems to me, just by looking at this, maybe it's a little misleading, but when we get this crossover situation, doesn't a lot of that crossover occur over compatible land use forest preserve areas? And is that the correct understanding of how this should be looked at? And secondly, even though I agree with Ernie in most what he said, the other thing is, if we adopted the dog leg for the 4L, which would really take away some of the impact of Niles from the diagonals, and then if we kept the 65 degrees, it would impact them a little bit more. But it seems like I would understand that comment more if we had not moved to the dog leg situation, and then maybe give Niles some relief with the 70-degree heading. But since we've moved to the dog leg situation, that seems like it's only fair that we could keep that at 65 and not have overly impacted Niles.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to answer the compatible land use as
Sure.
it's shown on that?
Yeah, a couple points. As Cynthia noted, number one, that I always should start off with as a reminder, you know, that these arrows only depict the heading and don't actually depict the actual flight location. So always keep that under consideration when looking at these. What I will say to Peter's question, the idea is that those turns happen much closer to the airport than further out over the communities. So ideally, yes, the majority of the traffic would be turning prior to getting into some of the more populated areas to the east there. But again, as we've discussed, each aircraft, based on their type of aircraft and performance and weather conditions, that turn might happen at various places. It won't necessarily happen all the time over the most ideal location. And that's kind of the essence of a vector heading. That is not a procedure. A procedure would put it precisely over compatible land use, where this, as we've discussed, allows for some dispersion and less of a concentration, but ideally, those turns would be happening much closer into the airport.
Thank you. Schiller Park, you're next.
Thanks, Sharon. No, I'll go along with the impacted area.
Great, thank you. Harwood Heights.
I would still like to go with 65 and then 80-degree as opposed to just the 80-degree single departure heading.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
Thanks, Karen. First, Ron, I appreciate you correcting me. I should not have used the word consecutive impacts. I just use that as I guess the generic of the fact that there's going to be noise along that corridor. But I concur with you. I just thought it was a point to bring up, and I appreciate everyone's comments on that. Having said that, I still believe the 2 departure headings for runway 9 right make the case. I know that in this discussion for departure headings, this isn't the exact time to talk about this, but one of the reasons that I thought about this with the overflights of the departure corridor on the final approach course for 27 Center is that on weeks where we're in the diagonals, we could still have that as issues, which is what we discussed at the last meeting. So I guess that was kind of the reason or my thought process for coming up with that. Having said that, I still concur that we should move from 1 departure heading on 9 right to the dual.
Thank you. River Grove.
I have no change. I still support the B because especially for my friend in Harwood Heights, I hate her having to have that noise all the time. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Des Plaines.
Can you hear me now? I'm on my
Yes.
3rd device.
We can hear you now.
3 devices. Good thing for Apple. All right. Yeah, I support the Park Ridge position on the dual things. One of the questions I had on these dual takeoff types of things on the dog leg on the 4 left, why is that dual takeoffs necessary? Why do you need more than 1? All I do is include more residents by doing that. The dual take, I have more people angry at me rather than fewer.
Yeah, so the real point behind adding a second vector heading is to add dispersion, so that the same communities that are underneath 1 vector heading might get some relief the next time that runway is used. So the idea is to—
You would alternate it back and forth, is what you're saying?
Correct.
All right. So, I mean, politically, it's a decision for an alderman like me is to support whether you make 10 people angry as opposed to 5 people who are much angrier. I think that's the way I could put it. All right. Understood.
Okay, Elmhurst.
Yeah, I have no further comments.
Okay, Bensonville.
No further comments. We stand with the impacted communities on the dual headings.
Great. Wooddale.
Nothing here.
Okay, and Schaumburg supports the impacted communities in their preference. Ron.
Pass.
Dan.
Yeah, I think the 10-degree heading is going to be hard for those residents to swallow. You also have to keep in mind that the 10-degree heading is also the 9 right long runway heading in the crosswind weeks, which is 50% of the schedule. So would certainly argue it's an overutilization of that corridor. And also from the standpoint of dispersion, this 25-degree turn, in this case, the 065, was a number the FAA came up with is doable by the entire fleet mix. And from what we understand, achieves the widest dispersion. So when you put a 10-degree in, you're taking aircraft that can easily accommodate a 25-degree turn and concentrating them into a 10-degree turn. And I don't really see the benefit of that. And from the examples we currently have, which is 28R, which is a 20-degree heading change. If you were to overlay that with these two green arrows, you would pretty much obscure those arrows entirely with the dispersion from one heading, which we think would result in less concentration. And the other thing to note is even though that 20-degree heading, which has been used for many years, if not decades, the concentration of aircraft is really closer to 15 degrees. They fall short of that heading by and large. So you should also visualize that. The assumption that all these aircraft are going to be at the 65-degree heading and that there's daylight between these two headings, I don't think is correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia?
We advocate for two headings, 70 and 80. Those are the lowest population outside of the runway heading, and that's our comment. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay. So at this time, I will entertain a motion in regards to departure headings for alternate H. Please be as specific as possible.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we change the alternative H departure headings from a single heading of 80 degrees to and add a second departure heading of 65 degrees, similar to the alternative D configuration or departure headings.
Is there a second?
I second it. Harwood Heights.
Thank you. Okay. We will move on to a roll call.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Elmhurst.
Aye.
Is that I? Sorry. Yes.
Yes, aye.
Thank
Yes.
you. Sorry,
aye.
got cut off. Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
yes,
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Ryan, moving on.
All right, moving forward to runway 10 left. As currently assigned in alternative H, runway 10 left vector heading is a 100-degree heading, offset to the south. This heading would be used in weeks 4 and 12 in the schedule. For alternative B, again, a similar situation where alternative B has 2 vector heading assignments. Alternative H currently only has the one at 100 degrees. Alternative B, in addition to the 100-degree heading, has a heading of 115 degrees to be utilized in the second instance when that runway is used in the schedule. So for alternative B, we have a first vector heading of 100 degrees and a second vector heading of 115 degrees. In alternative H, we currently only have a vector heading of 100 degrees.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. We are going to start with Schiller Park.
Thanks, Karen. Again, Schiller Park is impacted quite a lot by the airport. But on H right now, you're getting 2 weeks, 4 and 5 of noise, and 12 and 13 over the same people. And with the dual weeks 2 and 8 separated like that, it's a tough call, but you're infecting less people, but more new people possibly. So I think that the Schiller Park will go with the 2 headings.
Okay, thank you. Harwood Heights?
I don't know. I was looking at the 115 degrees that would give Schiller Park more noise. I was leaning toward going with the original on H for this one, but I will hear more from what the others and how they're affected.
Okay, thank you. Ward 39?
Some of the same arguments as the previous heading discussions. It seems to me that there is, in B, we seem to get over a more populated areas and using the 115 degrees, but it's at a time where the aircraft are at higher altitudes and probably more likely to have dispersion there. So I don't know if that's as much of a consideration as if that more densely populated area was closer to the airport. So I'm an advocate of 2 headings here.
Okay, thank you. River Grove.
I agree with the 2 headings, fairness, fairness, fairness. And rather than twice during the cycle going in the same direction, this way it again splits, and it gives different people the noise on different nights. So I support B.
Okay, thank you. Elmhurst.
Yeah, again, Elmhurst tends to like the single departure concept for simplicity, but in this case, we have both of these vectors heading into very populated areas, and keeping with this north-south split runway concept, we wanted to head south in this situation. So I would support the 2 vectors as they're drawn now, just because they disperse the departure noise more.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
We'll defer to the communities impacted, but having said that, I do believe that utilization of dual departures on 10 left makes sense.
Okay, Bensonville.
Bensonville stands with our neighbors and their preference for dispersion and goes with the 2 heading.
Okay, Des Plaines.
I'll go with the 2 headings, supporting the people who are impacted by it.
Okay, thank you. Dale.
Nothing here.
Okay, yep, Schaumburg is going to defer to the impacted communities. Where, with Elmhurst, we can see the benefits of the simplicity of a single departure heading, but also the benefits of having 2 departure headings. So Cynthia, you're up first.
Yep, we support 2 headings as well. And those 2 headings would be 100 and 101.
I'm sorry, Cynthia, can you repeat that? 100 and
100 and 110 are the 2 headings.
Thank you.
And we would just caution that as you go to 115 on this, the population impacts are much more significant. You can tell just by the coloring in the map, but we're talking a lot more people impacted. And these would be, I think, new impacts. And it's pretty well known throughout the Metroplex next gen implementation that new noise aggravates at a level that is really hard for those communities. So we would just advise staying with the under 20 degrees with 100 and 110 degree headings.
Okay, thank you. Ron?
No comment.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, the South Airfield here is where we think it's really important to look at the broader schedule when making this determination. And 28C arrivals are noted in weeks 5 and 13 as a primary arrival runway. I think it's important to keep in mind the same runway is scheduled another 4 times as the long runway in the crosswind weeks for configuration I. And that being the more probable, being the west flow configuration, we think what's actually probable here is 12 of 16 weeks with some level of arrivals on that runway. Not every arrival, because east and west flow usually occurs every week, although weighted towards west flow. And so when you put a 10-degree heading on top of that, I think that really speaks to what the committee was trying to avoid in overutilization of a single corridor And unfortunately, that is amplified by alternative H. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, back to Schiller Park.
Thanks, Karen. I've listened to, I take what Zach has to say a lot, but you go to 210 degrees, not being as knowledgeable. I see week 2 being more impacted. Those people being more impacted by just moving a little bit and trying to move it further away to try to find some relief, maybe not as loud as normal, but I would stay with the 100, 115.
Thank you. Harwood Heights.
Yes, based on the discussion of our sister companies, communities, I'm sorry, I will go with the dual headings.
Okay, thank you. Ward 39.
Yes, I'll stay with the 100 to 115 degree headings.
River Grove.
I have nothing further. I still support the dual heading.
Okay. Elmhurst.
No further comment. Thanks.
Park Ridge.
Nothing further.
Bensonville.
Nothing further.
Des Plaines.
Nothing further.
Wooddale.
Here.
Schaumburg doesn't have anything further, so Cynthia.
My comments just stand as from before.
Okay, thank you. Ron
Pass.
and Dan.
Yeah, I guess what we'd ask is the committee revisit this when it looks at consecutive impacts and how these, we're looking at a snapshot here. And I feel the overall rotation schedule, which is actually the lived experience of the residents, is what we should be looking at. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, once we get through all of these individual components, we recognize that we're looking at kind of isolated pieces of a bigger puzzle. And so we are going to take time at the end of all of this to make sure we're looking at everything put together and that we don't have any concerns or tweaks that need to be made. So agree with you, Dan. Okay, with that, it's time. I will entertain a motion on departure headings for runway 10 left.
Schiller Park will make a motion to accept 2 departure headings on the alternate H.
Can you specify those departure headings for me?
100 degrees and 115 degrees.
Perfect, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Harwood Heights, sorry.
Okay, great. Let's do roll call.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39 Ford,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights. I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
and Wooddale.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Let's move on.
Okay, so moving clockwise around the airport, we are on to runway 22 left, which is part of our crosswind configurations. Currently an alternative H. 22 left has 2 assigned departure headings, the first being 232 degrees in weeks 1 and 9, which is a turn to the west. And weeks 5 and 13, the departure would be a 212 degree turn, which is a slight turn to the south, versus alternative B, where we had again discussed utilization of the vector heading with a turn to better take advantage of that tri-state corridor to the south. And so this vector heading with a turn would be used in any week that the configuration would come up in the schedule. So it would be a single procedure where the aircraft would fly the runway heading and then turn to the south following that tri-state tollway until they reach 3,000 feet. So again, a little bit different like we were on 4 left, where we do have 2 vector headings, but they are separate turns in weeks 1 and 9 and 5 and 13 versus a single vector heading with a turn to be utilized in all weeks that runway 22 left is the primary departure runway.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Elmhurst, you are up first.
Madam Chair, I object to that. Bentonville is the first impacted community on this heading.
Bentonville, you'll have your turn to go first. So objection noted, but overruled.
Yeah, you get your share of noise over there in Bentonville, Evan, so you'll have your share of the discussion.
You're first on the next 2 runways, Evan, so don't get greedy.
So I think Elmhurst commentary is, as with the discussion that was put forth on 4L earlier in the meeting, where we were looking at an option of 2 departures that may go over more populated areas versus a dog leg that really takes advantage of compatible use down the tollway, which is noisy anyway. We're fully supportive of this, and in addition, the 1 departure concept versus the 2 is favorable in general. So we like this concept versus the 2 headings. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Evan, you're up next.
So just for clarification, we're flying for 1 mile and then that left turn to 180. Is that 1 mile off the end of the runway, or is it 1 mile from where the aircraft takes off?
Good question. And, this is something that, can be continued to refine, once we with air traffic control figure out how to best work it. But yes, the idea would be a length from the once the aircraft takes off to a point, ideally that would be where that tri-state turns to the south. This is the existing procedure that you have in your current Fly Quiet program. And so you can kind of see how that plays out with the departures that turn to the south off of runway 22 left today. And this is something that can be refined to get better adherence to make those turns a bit closer to that tri-state as best we can.
Okay, that's helpful because
the direction, to your question, the direction would be, the air traffic controller would really decide when the turn happens, and that would be based on, a distance that he sees would be able to make that turn to get to the south over that tri-state corridor.
Okay, I'd like to, if we could just refine that a little bit. There's some really good compatible land uses that this could turn over and then get down to that dog leg. But there's some really bad ones too. If we start doing that turn over residential, that could be a problem. So South Bentonville and North Elmhurst could see some unwanted noise. So I would just ask that I'm in favor of the dog leg. It makes a lot of sense if we can make sure that that turn is done over industrial.
Okay, River Grove.
I have to go with what Evan said. It seems like that dog leg goes pretty much through industrial areas, so it's not hitting a lot of residential areas. It's going over the tollway. Or as it was already said, there's already a lot of noise. So for once, I don't go with the split. I'm going with the dog leg again. It makes more sense.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Schiller Park.
Schiller Park will go with the impacted field.
Thanks, Russ. Wooddale.
No comments.
Harwood Heights.
Yes, I remember much discussion on this dog leg. So I would go with the dog leg again, even though there's 4 weeks of impact by H. that same 1 mile would be affected on all 4 weeks. So the dog leg, I would go with that, just a single heading.
Okay, thank you. Schaumburg agrees. We like the dog leg over compatible land uses. Ward 39.
Yeah, nothing further to add. I agree with the dog leg.
Park Ridge.
We'll concur with our neighbors to the south. We think the dog leg, just like it does for 4 left, and considering the fact we've used it for years under the current configuration, makes sense. So we would concur to go with the dog leg.
Okay, great. Displays.
Dog leg.
Okay. Dan.
Yeah, from a fundamental principle, we think the single heading that minimizes departure overlap with arrivals makes sense, and one that should be applied universally. Take advantage of whatever constraints the FAA has given the Committee on Turns and maximize that along with the dispersion. I think where we have some concern is the number of iterations in H. The green arrow you have to plug in weeks 1, 5, 9, and 13. And if I've learned anything from the FAA workshops, it's that less population doesn't mean less consideration when it comes to environmental justice. And these turns do tend to skew east into one of those corridors of concern. So I don't think we can ignore that. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia.
Yeah, we do support the dog leg, both to the north and the south. The way they're achieving that right now, and this is per Craig, the current manual for the air traffic controllers says just simply turn 180 off the ground to achieve what we're doing now to the south. So I think if we go forward with this, I just encourage Aaron and Ryan to get with air traffic and determine how best to achieve this configuration, because the fly mile out, 1 mile out and turn may not produce what you're trying to produce. I think there just needs to be an exercise there with air traffic directly to, this is the configuration we want. How do we achieve that? And that's all I had.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, I just concur with others that what is currently happening on this doesn't work. So as Cynthia said, and as Evan alluded to earlier, just a lot more work needs to be done with air traffic on this to figure out how you actually hit that corridor. More than likely, it's not going to be an aircraft flying a certain distance once its wheels up. It needs to be kind of a point beyond the end of the runway before an aircraft turns, because you have aircraft getting off the runway at all different points all up and down the runway. So a lot of work needs to be done to try to make sure this corridor works, because as we've seen with current conditions, it does not work to hit that corridor.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Okay, Elmhurst, you're up again.
Just to reinforce that this B concept is simpler with the one departure vector procedure, and it impacts a lot less populated areas, and really is intended to fly over the tollway, which I've looked at. Ryan mentioned that this is similar to the existing procedure for the current Fly Quiet program. And if you look at the tracks for those, they do heavily concentrate on the tollway. So I think it's proven to work pretty well. Thanks.
Thank you, Fenceville.
Nothing further to add.
Okay, River Grove.
I have a question. From what I understand, this has been the procedure that has been going on for a while. As I said before, it's going through industrial areas and down to the tollway. Has there been a lot of overflight on this, Ryan, or is there has it pretty well been working?
Well, as we've seen, as we report in tech committee in our quarterly flight quiet reports, where we go over the deviations from our preferential flight pass. This one is one that does get heavily used. However, we do see quite a bit of dispersion to the east. So those aircraft are making that turn sooner than we'd like. I think as the intent of this procedure was put in place, many, many years ago. But as we've all discussed, with this new program, we would definitely work closely with air traffic to refine this procedure so that it achieves the goal of concentrating, those flights over the compatible land use areas along the corridor. So to answer your question, there's a little bit more dispersion to the east than we'd like to see on this procedure as it is, or at least how it's being utilized. But we think that can be addressed with coordination with air traffic.
Okay, then I continue to support the dog leg.
Thank you, Dennis. Schiller Park?
Schiller Park concurs with the single dog leg, and a couple points were brought up that are very interesting that I was thinking about. The training with the air traffic controllers is not just for dog legs, but I think everything we've been talking about, so you trained, or because we're talking about it, but we need them to do it. So that's a matter of concern too. But I do support the single dog leg.
Great, thank you. Wooddale?
Nothing here.
Harwood Heights?
Yes, I also support the single dog leg, and which could always be tweaked later once we hear from air traffic controllers.
Great, thank you. Schaumburg doesn't have anything further. Ward 39?
Nothing further.
Park Ridge?
Nothing further.
Des Plaines?
Nothing further.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, remembered the second part of my thought, sort of the big picture on the schedule. Again, going back to the number of iterations, the 1, 5, 9, and 13, that's assuming with alternative H that the wind cooperates, and those are the only west flow weeks in the crosswind configurations, which we have examples from IFQ is not the case, that west flow tends to dominate not just for weeks, but months on end. So what you really need to consider is doubling that. There are actually 4 additional weeks where that dog leg is probable. And second to that, looking at the big picture, just to remind the committee, the alternate for departures, the long runway is 28C, which exposes that southwest quadrant to the departure impacts of that long runway, and the southeast quadrant to the arrival impacts. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia?
My comments stand, thanks.
Thank you. Ron?
Pass.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our discussion. I will entertain a motion on runway 22 left departure headings.
Elmhurst will make a motion to go with the current B configuration as it's laid out on the graphic for departure off of 22L to head out 1 mile and then to turn south along the tollway for a dog leg departure.
Des Plaines seconds that motion.
Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines, Malcolm. Yeah, okay. Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes,
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes,
Schaumburg,
Yes,
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure Alderman Chester. Okay, motion carries.
okay, great. Thank you. I think we have time for one more runway before we have to move on.
I think we only have 2 more.
I know, but
Well,
well,
come on. Sorry.
all right, we'll see how this goes and what time we're at. So, all right, Ryan.
All right, moving on to runway 28 right for alternative H. Runway 28 right currently has a single vector heading assigned at 260 degrees in weeks 8 and 16 when that primary departure runway comes up in the schedule. The alternative B, just like we saw on the east side of the airport, has a similar 2 departure headings for each week for runway 28 right. 260 degrees is the first vector heading that would be used in the schedule, followed by a second vector heading of 245 degrees, which is a further turn to the southwest in week 10. And so the difference here, again, of course, is 1 vector heading versus 2, and the degree assignments of both. So these are on your left, the current assignment for runway 28 right and alternative H, and what was approved for alternative B on the right in green.
Okay, Bensonville, you're up first.
It's actually kind of interesting for us. By any southern direction or southern vector, we're actually going towards more population in Bensonville. There are compatible land uses right off the end of this runway. So from Bensonville's perspective, we'd probably prefer a straight off, but we understand that that doesn't make sense for our neighbors to the west. So we'd actually defer to whatever our neighbors to the west want.
Okay, Wooddale.
I think further south is obviously better for us.
Okay, thank you. Elmhurst.
Yeah, I think that, and again, the 1 departure is simpler, but in this case, the 2 departures, again, the 260-degree departure is present in both, but we're adding the 245-degree departure that tends to go over some of the golf courses in that area. So I view that as an improvement and spreading out the departure operations. So I think we could support that 2 departure option.
River Grove.
I again go back to doing a dual runway system for justice. It's again splitting, giving someone else the noise another night. This way, the community right out off of the single gets it twice, where this way it's spread out again. And that's what our whole program's about, is spreading out the noise and justice for all,
Okay, thank you. Schiller Park.
Schiller Park concurs with the 2 angles. Again, our job is to disperse the noise and not impact everybody all at one time. So I'll go on with 2.
Okay, Harwood Heights.
I'll go with the dual headings, as long as heading 245 does not enter into a more densely populated area, although there's golf courses there. So if that's the case, I'll go with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 39.
Yeah, I agree with that 2 heading approach. It's nice to hear that there's just a lot of golf courses out there, and especially since a lot of people are not playing golf at night. It's a real plus to go with the 2 headings here.
Okay, thank you. Park Ridge.
We concur and we'll defer to our neighbors to the south and southwest, but we would prefer the dual departures.
Okay, Des Plaines.
Dual departure.
Okay, and from Schaumburg's perspective, we're going to defer to the impacted communities. It looks like maybe 245 threads the needle between kind of more populated areas, but defer to those impacted communities. Ron, you're up first.
No comment.
Dan?
Yeah, this is another instance where the big picture of the H schedule, I think, is important. What we're showing is weeks 8 and 16 scheduled on 28R. Have to keep in mind there's additional 4 weeks scheduled on 28C as the long runway for the crosswind weeks. And in alternative B, the committee also selected a 10-degree heading for that runway. And given the probability of west flow and that crosswind actually comes up 8 weeks in the schedule, you need to double that. So you have a probable 10 weeks on that 260 heading and a probable 2 weeks on the 245 heading. So from the standpoint of, and not necessarily, I'm not saying it's 5 times the operations, because those crosswind weeks would certainly have less operations. But from the standpoint of number of impacts in the overall schedule, this is where you start to get into some real inequities. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia?
Okay, so I'd just like to comment, SOC is going to be meeting here very quickly. Dr. Tranny has just kind of done a microanalysis of this in AEDT 3, I think D. And the concept that 245 is better for Wooddale than 250 is not accurate. Wooddale's impacts are exactly the same at those 2 headings, whereas Bensonville suffers another 1,000 people impacted. So it would be our recommendation to SOC and this committee that we advocate for 2 headings on 28 right, and those 2 headings are 250 and 260 to minimize the impacts to those who carry the most impacts, and that's really Bensonville, who is closest in. Turning those heavy aircraft are going to impact Bensonville even more. That is another thing we will be looking at right now. Our AEDT analysis is on the average aircraft. We have not had time to do the heavy aircraft analysis, but hope to do that by the time we meet with SOC, so we can really be better informed on how our communities are choosing who's impacted and how. So long story short, we advocate for 250 and 260 and 2 headings on 28 right.
Okay, thank you. Bensonville?
We're gonna go with SOC's recommendation right there for 250 and 260.
Okay, Wooddale?
Well, I suppose the 250 is still south of 260, so I guess I can roll with that.
Okay. Elmhurst?
No comment.
River Grove?
I still support the alternate B.
Okay. Schiller Park?
Alternate B.
Harwood Heights?
I'd go with the alternate B with 260 and 250 to have less impact over any population that may be there.
Okay. Ward 39?
I defer to the impacted communities, which seems to be 250 and 260 at this point.
Okay, thank you. Park Ridge?
Like Peter, we'll defer to the communities impacted if they feel 250 and 260 is appropriate, but we would still support a dual departure off of 28 right.
Thank you. Des Plaines?
Dual departure support the affected communities.
Okay. Schaumburg also supports the impacted communities. Let's see, Ron, you're up first.
Pass.
All right, Dan?
Yeah, just a concern that predictability and equity of the final plan may be exclusive of population impact. You know, this is sort of a new criteria the committee is now making decisions on, and I don't think we necessarily have all the information to be making those decisions at this point. We had urged, in line with the criteria we started with, that residents be treated equally, and you allow the FAA to do their job and figure out what the population impacts are. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Cynthia?
250 and 260 dual headings off of 28 right. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'll entertain a motion on departure headings for runway 28 right.
Bensville makes a motion to adopt runway headings of 260 and 250 off of runway 28 right.
Is there a second?
Howard Heights seconds it.
Okay, roll call, please. This is for runway departure headings of 250 and 260.
Sorry, who is the second?
Harwood Heights.
Okay. Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes,
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
yes,
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, so we have one runway left. We typically try to stop at 11, but we do also have a vote on the Fly Quiet Committee Vice Chair item on the agenda. So I'm looking for some feedback if you all want to just kind of plow through and get through this last runway, knowing we're going to run past 11, or if you prefer to stop here, we'll pick up with runway 27 left at our next meeting, and we'll move to the vote now to try and wrap up by 11.
I personally think we should get it over with, so we don't just keep dragging this out. You know, let's get it over with.
Chair Park Ridge concurs with Mr. Ryan. Let's plow through the last one.
Elmhurst is okay with that too.
Yes.
Let's get it
Okay.
done.
All right, let's keep going then, Ryan. Thank you all for your commitment.
Okay, the last primary departure runway for alternative H is runway 27 left. Similar to the other east-west parallel runways, we have a single departure vector heading of 280 degrees that would be utilized in weeks 2 and 10. This is a turn to the north. Alternative B has a similar vector heading of 280, but it includes an additional second vector heading to be used in the second week that the primary runway comes up in the schedule. So we have a 280 degree heading and a second 295 degree heading to be used in week 7. So alternative H, a single vector heading of 280 in weeks 2 and 10 versus alternative B that this committee approved, a vector heading of 280 and a second heading of 295 degrees.
Okay, thank you. Bensonville, you're up first.
We love this runway. We love 27 left. It's great for us. It's all over industrial, compatible land uses, no residents impacted. We wish the airport would use this runway exclusively with its other northern long runway. For that being said, it doesn't really matter for us. You can fly, as long as you're flying north or west, we don't care off this runway. So we don't have any objections to any heading.
All right, thanks, Kevin. All right, Wooddale.
Yeah, I'll roll with that.
All right, well, Schaumburg's next, and since you guys don't care, Schaumburg does have a preference on this runway. Our preference would be to go with a single departure heading of 275 because that goes over compatible land uses in Schaumburg. That's where we have industrial parks, 390 tollway. The 295 is problematic for us in that it goes over our residential areas that are more populated. And so for that reason, we support the single departure heading and would want the departure heading to be 275 to make sure we hit those compatible land uses. All right, Des Plaines, you're up.
Okay, that's fine. This is not a impact on us, so if that's better for Schaumburg, we'll go with that.
Okay, Elmhurst.
Well, I think any plan should have some element of consistency and simplicity, and with every one of the departures shown for alternative D, the first heading was 10 degrees off the runway heading, and then the second one was another 15 degrees from that, or 25 total. So that was fairly consistent, but we changed that in the last one. We tweaked that by 5 degrees. So this one again has the 10 degrees off the runway, and then another 15 degrees for the second departure heading. I think that we do have consensus on 2 departures, but I'm willing to listen if one is the least impact and handles the most, take advantage of the most compatible land use. I think that's great. And overall, I've stated again and again that 1 departure heading is simpler than 2. Thanks.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
Thanks, Karen, and I apologize. I zoned out during your couple of comments. Did you suggest, Karen, a difference from the 280 and 295 is approved in alternative B?
Yes, Schaumburg's position is that we would like a single departure heading of 275 for compatible land use purposes.
Okay, flying runway heading. I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying. In deference to my esteemed colleague and neighbor to the west, since we've looked at the parallel runways and approved dual departures on pretty much everything else, with the exception of the diagonals, we would still be in favor, with tweaking, of a dual departure on 27 left.
Okay, River Grove.
It appears that both the 260 and 295 are going over residential areas to begin with on takeoff, as well as the 280. And I think, again, out of fairness, I would go with the dual. I'm sorry, Karen, to disagree with you, but I know that one will go through Schaumburg and go through the goalposts, but I think the other one is fairness, again, to 2 communities rather than just one. So I would go with the dual and alternate B.
Okay, Niles isn't here. Schiller Park.
Karen, Schiller Park, Bensonville is open to anything, and so is Wooddale. And the only concern is Schaumburg. Then I'll go along with Schaumburg's request for the single runway.
Thank you. Ward 39.
Oh, yes, just generally I've been in favor of the 2 heading approach, but in this situation, the layout of the community, east versus west, is vastly different as far as population density and industrial areas. I would defer to the impact communities here. And again, I'm usually for the 2 heading approach, but in this situation, it just seems to be makes logical sense to concur with Schaumburg there.
All right, Harwood Heights.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, looking at these both, by the time it gets to Schaumburg, is it pretty high up in the air where you're not going to feel the impact as much? Or we can tweak it instead of 295 to make it 290 or 285? Some thoughts.
Yeah, I'll answer if you're okay. I'll
Please.
hold myself to the same requirements as the rest of you, and I'll respond in my next turn if that's okay. So I'm sorry, Cynthia, you're up first this time.
Okay, thanks, Karen. So our recommendation going in was 2 headings, but I can tell you, since I've heard from 3 of SOC members that they support this concept, that I believe SOC would support it as well. So therefore we would support the single heading concept at 275 degrees. It does no doubt take advantage of compatible land use, which we're always a fan of.
Okay, Ron.
This is an interesting one. It's hard to tell from this map as to what kind of population there is around the corridor straight off the runway. But of all the areas around the airport, this is the one area that has a true noise compatible corridor, and that's the industrial area of Elk Grove Village and then Bussey Woods. That is the only noise compatible corridor around this entire airport, and it would be a shame to not use it. But again, like I said, from this map, it's hard to tell what kind of population impacts there would be from a straight out versus trying to head to the north as much as you can to hit that huge corridor.
Thanks, Ron. Dan?
Yeah, I'm on a conference call. I can't talk now. Call me later.
Okay. I fear here we're making arbitrary decisions based on the appearance of these arrows. This represents the flight track, not the noise impact. And looking at the overall H schedule, there are 0 weeks scheduled as departures in this quadrant in the crosswind weeks. All the west flow crosswind long runway utilization is the south airfield. So we truly are only talking about 2 weeks here. And considering what the impact is, this is a long runway. It will take the heavy aircraft. We would object on behalf of the Fair residents in Itasca and Roselle that would be significantly impacted now, not only by departures, but what is the dominant burden in this quadrant, which is arrivals. And in this case, arrivals are both on 9 right and 9 center. So something to consider.
Okay. Bensonville, back to you.
Yeah, my comments stand. Our last residential neighborhood up here has been acquired and demolished and is turning into industrial. So I don't have residents up here I need to defend.
All right. Wooddale?
I have a question on, was it 275 you were saying that we're going to ditch the 280 and not go with the 295 and just go to a sole 275?
That's correct. To hit the Illinois 390 corridor.
I'd like to see some sort of visual representation of the 275. I'm not quite sure if that's far enough north. I do have a little pocket of residents up there. I don't know the actual noise contour impacts up there. So I would be hesitant to make that change.
Okay. So again, from Schaumburg's perspective, I understand what Ron's saying about, it would be great if we could hit Bussey Woods, but I think as you can see from the 295, we skirt Bussey Woods and then heads, through residential, hit a little bit of Bussey Woods and then hit a whole lot more residential, whereas the 390 corridor has been developed with supportive land uses of that tollway, which again, we've talked in other departure headings of trying to hit those compatible land uses and the tollways being desirable flight paths. And so it's still Schaumburg's preference that we make that shift. It's a 5-degree shift just because, again, you can see the 390 alignment. So that's Schaumburg's position. Displays?
I have no further comment.
Elmhurst?
The only comment I would make is, and Dan from FAIR mentioned the word arbitrary, that if we make changes to this departure plan for H, we probably should go back and revisit B where changes were made, because it's the same decision principles that we're using, and somehow we ended up with a different answer a month or two later. That's the only comment I have.
Okay, thank you. Evan, I see your hand. I'll circle back to you when we get through everyone. Park Ridge.
Thank you, Karen. I got a couple of concerns here. Part of the goal of this committee has been under the split airfield concept is to keep airplanes departing from the north airfield turning to the north and airplanes from the south airfield turning to the south. Karen, I understand what you're saying and your concern for your quadrant is, but we've already turned 28 right to the south. where in the past, under original fly quiet, the preferred flight track was a 290 heading, taking it to the northwest. Since we turned those aircraft to the south, it would seem that again, under Dennis's concern, which is to spread out the impacts, the dual headings, we can tweak the actual degrees, but I think that the dual departures are the case. And the further point to that is, if we're going to go with a single departure on 27 left to follow 390 and whatever, then I'm prepared to make a motion to reopen the discussion on 9 right. You know, in the Northeast quadrant, we're trying to be the good corporate citizen, if you will, and taking the dual departures, when in fact, all things being said, I'd rather have the 090 fly runway heading and send those airplanes down the Kennedy Expressway, and make the turn after they get to 3,000 feet. But, you know, we've accepted the dual departures off of 9 right. I would suggest that, given the precedence of what we're doing here, that we give consideration to the dual departures on 27 left. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. River Grove.
I concur with Ernie 100%. I'd rather make a few little adjustments on the dual rather than the single, so I stand with alternate B. If we have to make some minor adjustments, that's fine, but I will stick with the B.
Okay, Schiller Park.
After listening to everybody talking about this, I was kind of just thinking about a couple little towns, but what we're trying to do is disperse it more. So I will change it to a dual instead of a single. So
Ward
alternate B.
Okay, Ward 39.
Oh, yeah, similar to Russell, I was kind of up in the air on this one, not being all that familiar with the lay of the land out west of the airport personally. But what Dennis and Russell were kind of alluding to was just consistency and fairness. Same with the Elmhurst. So I'm going to change too. I'm going to go back to the dual headings here for this runway.
Okay, Harwood Heights.
I thank you. Yes, I'm glad for the clarification because I heard the one heading on the H to be 260, then I heard 275 and it shows 280. So it is 275. And the dual headings are fine. I think that as we tweak the 280, we should tweak the 295 and go with the dual headings.
Okay. Evan will sneak you in and then I'll go to the consultants.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. It seems like we can do better. It seems like that just drawing arrows on this may not be effective, and I think we should have our consultants take another look at this. Ron makes a really good point. If maybe we call it a double dog leg or something, but if you take this and you fly for a mile, then fly north, and then try to hit that Interstate 90 into Bussy Woods, you've got a beautiful corridor right there that I think we should be able to take advantage of. So I'm going to request that the committee consider remanding this back to our consultants to take another look at.
Okay, let's see, Cynthia, you're first.
Yeah, you know, I would just start with respectfully asking the committee to defer to the most impacted communities as they have in all the other quadrants and off both diagonal runways. There seems to be a kind of a different aspect putting on this that we're not doing to the other communities. So I just ask for that point of grace to start. The 275 heading is one of the lowest population, best compatible land use headings, as is a runway heading. Once you get into above 10-degree heading on this, you start to ramp up and double the population impacted. And while dispersion is being viewed as a good thing, I would view dispersion as a good thing only to the limit of not increasing the contour and the, I guess, significant impact on homes, which we're erring on when we get into these more severe headings. We certainly can give a visual depiction of the exact impact of this, and we will do that for the next meeting. If the committee cannot concede to the deferred community's impact of just one heading at 275, then the option of a 275 and maybe a 280 heading would be supported by us. But we can also bring back the data to demonstrate the value.
Thank you. Ron?
Pass, no further comments.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, just again, a concern about determining population impact in this manner. To really determine population impact, you need to consider all the factors: arrivals and departures, full fleet mix, the noise from the entire fleet mix. These are things that really only the FAA is qualified to do. So what I'd urge the committee to do is define principles, which I think it did a good job in the initial criteria of what's equitable, fair, predictable for residents. And we're really going to have to rely on the FAA to determine what those population impacts are. And just a reminder, in this corridor, the workhorse are those arrivals, which are already in the compatible land use corridor. And to consider those residents when you're determining the departure headings, whether you want to overlap the same corridors. We've made a attempt on all the other quadrants to avoid that. And I'm not sure why this one is becoming the exception, considering there are residents that are already significantly impacted by the arrivals. Thank you.
Okay. That wraps up our discussion as the impacted community. I am going to make a motion to defer a decision on this and ask Landerman and Brown for some additional analysis in regards to the visual of the 275 runway heading as requested by Wooddale. I will ask Bensonville and Ron to provide their thoughts to Landerman and Brown in advance of our next meeting so that they can provide a visual depiction of that. And any other committee members or commission members who have thoughts, please get those to Landerman and Brown as soon as possible so that we can include that as well. So it was a long motion, but basically I'm motioning that we defer this to our November meeting.
Howard Heights second the emotion. The emotion. We're seconding the emotion here.
All right, can we get a roll call?
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harvard Heights,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
No.
River Grove,
No.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you all. So again, please, if you have any thoughts on these departure headings, please get them to Landerman Brown. You can also send them to me as soon as possible so they have time to work on it. I think kudos to Landerman Brown. I think these visuals were very helpful to facilitating our discussion today. So we'll continue that to the November meeting. So with that, we are going to move on to the selection of the Fly Quiet Committee Vice Chair. Maura sent out, we only received 2 very qualified nominees. So we have Russ Klug from Schiller Park and we have Bob Dunn from Elmhurst. So the way we are going to handle this is Maura is going to display a poll. The results will not be displayed and only Fly Quiet committee members are eligible to vote for vice chair. So ask you all to cast your vote and then Maura will let us know the results.
If anyone's having trouble, it's at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar. There's a button for polls. And if you click on that, it should.
I think
pop
you
up.
have to do that, Maura.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, launch. Sorry. Okay, now it should be showing.
Yeah, now it is.
Sorry about that. Okay, everyone has voted and Alderman Dunn received 10 votes and, oh, I'm sorry, we're not supposed to, no, I'm sorry, there's 10 votes total. So Alderman Dunn received the most votes. So is that okay? Is that?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, sorry.
So
I'm sorry.
thank you all for bearing with us while we worked out the technological aspect of this. This would have been easier if we were in person. Appreciate both Russ and Bob's willingness to serve. Congratulations, Bob. Nothing's going to change. This is just in the event that for some reason I'm not able to attend a meeting. We don't halt our process. So thank you all for that. I'm going to keep moving. Our next meeting, we did add a November meeting. I think we're making really great progress. We wanted to continue that. So November 18th at 9:30 a.m. we will be via Zoom still. So please make sure you have that on your calendars. And I know some of you have indicated you have conflicts, so please send your alternates so that we can continue these great discussions. Moving on, comments from the audience. Maura, do you have any?
Dan, you were asking about raising hand, but you didn't have any. I did not receive any requests.
Okay. Well, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move. So
Second.
All right.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment before we finish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to congratulate Bob Dunn. He's an outstanding member, and I have absolutely no problem with him winning the election.
Thank you. Kind words.
I appreciate your support, Russell, and the reason I'm doing that is to support Karen. I think she's doing a great job, and the goal is to bring this Fly Quiet Committee to a successful, but semi-expedient and sometime soon. Thanks.
I agree. Karen is doing a very good job.
Well, I'm not going to adjourn the meeting if this is where we're going to go with this conversation.
we love
All right.
you, Karen.
All
It's a
right.
roll call.
Roll call for adjournment.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines. Elmhurst,
Yes.
Howard Heights,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
and Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Everyone have a great day.
Everyone have a
See you,
great day.
everyone.
Thank you.
Hi.